morning. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this morning at the Women's Forum. I think I have a bit of a challenge, which is going to wake you up after this great Cartier gala dinner. But this morning we're going to speak about a topic we're all passionate about, which is gender diversity. And we will do it in a slightly, I guess, disruptive way compared to what you might have heard in the past on this topic. We believe today is really a time for change. It's time for change when we look at numbers. You've heard about those numbers. Women today make up about 55% of master's degree globally in many countries. And yet, when we look at representation of women in boards or in executive committee, depending on the studies, it would take about 90 years to get parity in those segments, at those levels. If we try to forget about the fact that we're speaking about people, that we're speaking about women, when we step back, I guess there are very, very few resources that are so underutilized in business. So when we founded Diverseo, we looked for solutions. We had a vision which was to change the paradigm in diversity management to get impact. And in our quest for solutions, we turned to science. We turned to science and we started working with researchers at Harvard University and other eminent institutions looking for solutions. And a few years later, this is the kind of impact that we obtain with some institutions by integrating high-level science and basic science on how the mind operates into business. So in this company, for example, they increased the percentage of women in expatriate general managers' positions from 15% to 34% in 36 months. And we're going to see why and how they've been able to achieve such a good result. What we need to think about is that our mind is like a computer with two processors. We have a first processor, which we're going to call level 1, which is higher, deliberate, thoughtful. For example, when I'm speaking to you, I'm concentrating on what I'm telling you. And we have a second processor, which is totally automatic and works without thinking. For example, still, when I'm talking to you, I'm performing a few motor tasks. I'm standing. I'm using my hands. And I do this without having to concentrate on what I'm doing. And it's highly important to understand that. When it comes to social interaction, each time we see someone for the first time, our level 2 processor is going to get activated. And our level 2 processor, in the space of just a few milliseconds, is going to provide the individual in front of us attributes that might or might not correspond to the specific individual we have in front of us. Those attributes are derived from our past experience, from the culture in which we live, and for the environment in which we operate on a daily basis. This level 2 is really very powerful, and we're going to see how powerful it is, and we're going to experience this all together. What I'm telling you is that on this chessboard that you see up there, square A and B, I'm not speaking about the letters, I'm speaking about the squares themselves. Square A and B are exactly the same shade of gray. So this and that is exactly the same gray. Who sees this as being the same shade of gray? Please raise your hands. No one? So I'm going to remove the context. Do you now see them as being the same shade of gray? Please raise your hands. All of you? But I guess you probably think that I did some kind of a trick, right? Yeah? Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to add some PowerPoint white lines on that shape. And when you see them as being the same shade of gray, I will please ask you to raise your hands. Are you with me? Okay. Yeah? No? Okay. Anyone? Okay. So what's interesting here, if I remove the white lines and you see the shape again, even though your level 1 knows that A and B are exactly the same shade of gray, your level 2 is so powerful that you just cannot see them as being the same shade of gray. And you might wonder why, right? So what's happening here is that around A, the squares are lighter, right? Around B, they're darker. And then you have the cylinder here, which is projecting a shadow, which is further reinforcing this impression. What's really important to understand is that the representations we have in our minds are not the direct representation of reality. The representations we have in our minds are our interpretation of reality. And once we know that we tend to interpret, the best practice and the habit we need to build is to have tools so that our representations in our mind can be a better representation of the reality around us. And the tool that I have built for myself here on this shape is this gray rectangle, because once I link A and B here, I see them as being exactly the same shade of gray. Now, for those who have doubts, you can come to the other session we'll have later today and play with my computer and see that there is absolutely no trick here on this shape. So now we're going to do a sort of group exercise. I will ask all of you to participate. We're going to make a small test. You will see words and pictures on the screen there. Each time you will see the picture of a male, you will say left as loud as you can. And each time you will see the picture of a female, you will say right again as loud as you can. Are you with me? I need to hear everyone. And please go as fast as you can. If you make mistakes, it's okay. We're going to go on. Okay? Let's go. Okay, good. Now, we're going to move to words now. Each time you see a word related to leadership or to a leader, you say left. Each time you see a word related to helper, you say right. Are you with me? Let's go. Okay, louder, faster, okay? It's going to get a bit more complex now. Each time you see a word related to leader, you say left. The picture of a man, you say left. Word related to helper, you say right. Picture of a woman, you say right. Are you with me? Let's go, as fast as you can. Okay? Now, we have reverted the dimensions. Each time you see a picture of a woman, you say left. Picture of a male, you say right. Are you with me? Let's go. Okay. Now, again, we have two dimensions. Each time you see a word related to leader, you say left. A word related, a picture of a female, you say left. Word related to helper, you say right. Picture of a male, you say right. Are you with me? Let's go. As fast as you can, as loud as you can. Come on. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, what you have done here is what we call an implicit association test. On the first block where you had male and leader, female and helper, you went actually much faster than on the second block. On the first block, you needed 867 milliseconds. On the second block, 1,315 milliseconds, which means that even us in this room, we have a stronger association of male with leadership and female with being helper or subordinates. Now, for the Women's Forum, in partnership with the Women's Forum, we've conducted an online research, with a sample of about 800 managers and executives. And we are going to share the results with you. But this is important to understand that the results that we have on those tests are highly predictive of our behaviors. But understanding that we have those kind of associations is also very helpful, because we know that 80% of the people who take this kind of test on an important association for themselves are going to adjust their behaviors. So when we look at the results we had from the overall study, what happened was that if you ask people if they explicitly believe that men and women are equally good leaders, about 70% of the people are going to say yes. Men and women are equally good leaders. On the implicit or unconscious side, things look a bit different. 55% of the people are going to have a stronger association of the unknown man you had in the test with leadership, while the female famous leaders that were included in the test, only 25% of the people are going to see them as great leaders. We also looked at the difference between men and women on those tests. Explicitly, the differences are very tiny. Implicitly, both men and women have these kind of associations, though slightly stronger for the men. And there are reasons for that. The leadership equal male association is very sticky. We thought maybe it's because people did not recognize the women. Well, when they recognize 5 women or more, the scores are about the same. But they also believe that they recognize the men, and they probably also have an association of those men being extremely good leaders. We looked at whether there were differences across functions or industries. Well, yes, there are, and some have a bigger challenge than others. In marketing or HR, globally, associations are about neutral, including at the implicit level, whereas in operations and engineering, people have a stronger association of men with leadership. Across industries also, the results look slightly different. In the general population, we had an average association of about 0.2. Consulting looks having a bit stronger association of men with leadership, followed by financial services and telecoms, with government being much more neutral than all others. Many people believe that time will solve the issue. Well, here, what we've seen was that the younger generation actually has a stronger association of male with leadership, and that was not because they didn't recognize the women. So time will not solve the issue. We shouldn't wait to act. So then what needs to be done? There are other solutions, but in this test, in the research, what we've seen is that role models do have an impact. Men who work mainly with female executives or female managers have a stronger association of female with leadership. There could be 2 reasons. Those men are more inclined to be willing to work with a female boss, but we also know that through the research with malleability of bias, that working with a female leader on a daily basis does change such associations. Now, you might wonder why this is important to look at those topics and those numbers. What we have seen through research is that those unconscious associations actually are highly predictive of our behaviors, but also of people's performance. if you interact or if you work in a culture or an environment where people have those kind of associations, or people believe and see women more as helpers than as leaders, we know that this is a criteria. This is one reason why women are going to opt out or are going to go more into the support roles or the support functions in companies. The other point is that when a boss has some kind of unconscious associations that are in oppositions with implicit or explicit performance criteria, people perceive it, and we've measured the impact it has on performance. It reduces somebody's performance on average by 20%. This is a lot. So what needs to be done? The companies that have obtained results started, like many others, by getting CEO buy-in, of course, but we found it was much more easier to get CEO buy-in when people start being aware of those implicit associations. It is actually quite disturbing for a CEO to take a test such as the one that you've done in the group here, and to understand that, yes, sometimes he makes decisions that he might not have taken otherwise. So they start looking also at the business case, at integrating diversity in their strategy in a slightly different way. Once this is done, of course, it is much easier to move forward, but moving forward, the point is not to provide women with leadership seminars or to have concierge services in companies. The changes that are needed are really deep. They go deep, but they need to be targeted. And to be targeted, you need numbers. You need to collect numbers, of course, on the demographics, as we all do. But we can get much more effective if we collect numbers about those implicit associations, if we start to understand what they are, and if we start to understand which ones are going to be the strongest barrier to women's progression to leadership positions. Once this is done, once we know exactly where we need to act, the question is how to act. Very often we found that HR processes, even the best ones, do not reduce cognitive bias. You've seen how our level 2 is powerful. You cannot override it. So instead of building standard processes that everyone needs to use, it's highly important to understand the implicit mechanisms that shape decisions and to see how those might be slightly transformed to make sure that we can be more objective in decisions that we make. The second point is to have the right values and the right culture. It's easier to work on culture and values, but here, what I would like to draw your attention on is the small cues that you might not see that trigger those attributes that might be counterproductive for women. And the last point is to set action-oriented KPIs. What we've seen is that having a sort of 30% target very often reminds everyone about the fact that a professional is not only a professional but a woman, triggers the stereotypes. So setting actions and checking that the actions are effective is probably the best lever moving forward. Thank you.